Hello guys, welcome to my channel. In this tutorial, I will be sharing with you on how to solve quadratic equation by factorizing, and this is the part 2 of this series. And let's take an example. If we have 2h squared plus 5h plus 3 equal 0. So the first thing you should take note of is the coefficient of h squared. Once the coefficient of h squared is greater than 1, then you have to multiply 2h squared by 3. So 2h squared times 3, that is going to give us 6h squared. So right now we're going to find two factors of 6h squared such that the product will be 6h squared and the sum would be 5h. So now the factors of 6 are 2 and 3. So if we multiply positive 2 by positive 3, that gives us positive 6. And if we add them together, their sum would be positive 5. Therefore, the factors we are looking for will be plus 2h and plus 3h. These two numbers, we are going to substitute them into this position and replace the whole of plus 5h by both of them. So once that happens, the equation automatically becomes 2h squared plus 2h plus 3h plus 3 equal 0. So you notice that plus 5h has been replaced by 2h plus 3h. So now we have 4 terms in this question. This is the first term, the second, the third, and the fourth. So the next step is to try and factor this equation. And we are going to factor them in twos. So we're going to factor the first two, which are 2h squared and plus 2. So the GCF of these two numbers is 2h. So let's write it out here. 2h, open parenthesis. So 2h squared divided by 2h. That is going to give us h. Alright? And 2h divided by 2h, that's going to give us 1. So this will become 1. Then secondly, we're going to find the GCF of 3h and 3. So the GCF of 3h and 3 is plus 3. So if we divide 3h by 3, that is going to give us h. And if we divide 3 by 3, that's going to give us 1 equal 0. So if you look at this equation very well, you discover that we have the same question, the same value in the parentheses, this and this, they are the same. So we can now write it as h plus 1 in parentheses. And if we cancel them from here, cancel this and this from here. What are we left with? We are left with 2h plus 3. And this will be equal 0. So now, we can now set both of them to 0. So h plus 1 is equal 0 and 2h plus 3 is equal 0. So we are going to isolate h by subtracting 1 from both sides. So if we subtract 1 from both sides, -1, then plus 1 minus 1 will cancel out, and we have just h on the left side, and that will be equals to 0 minus 1. That's going to give us -1. Also, we are going to isolate h in the second part by subtracting 3 from both sides. So if we do that, we're going to have -3, subtract -3 from both sides. So plus 3 minus 3 will cancel out, and now we are left with 2h, and this is equals to 0 minus 3, and that is going to give us -3. So now you can see we have 2h on the left side, and that is equal -3. So in order to find the value of the variable h, we have to divide both sides by 2. So divide this by 2, divide this by 2. So 2 is going to cancel out 2. 2 into 2 is 1, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. So now h is equal -3 over 2. Now the final answer would be, therefore h is equal -1 and -3 over 2. Final answer. And this value can also be, the -3 over 2 can also be written as -1/1/2. Okay, but you don't need to bother yourself over that. You can stop at this point. So this is the final answer to this question. Let's take another example. If we have 5x squared -9x -2 equal 0. Now you can see that the coefficient of x squared is greater than 1. The coefficient of x squared is 5, and that is greater than 1. So the first thing to do is to multiply 5x squared by -2. And when you do that, you're going to have -10x squared. So at this point, we are going to look for two factors of 10, such that when we add them together, we should have, their sum should be -9. So what are the factors of 10 that can give us that value when added together? So let's take 1 and 10. So if we multiply the product of 1 and 10, both of them right now are positive, and we are looking for the product that can give us -10. So let's assign negative to one of them. If we assign negative to this, at the end, their sum will be positive. So let's assign negative to -10 to 10, and then positive to 1. So the product of +1 and -10 is -10. And the sum of +1 and -10 is -9. So once you have gotten the values, now you can include x to them. So this will be +1x and then -10x. Since we have just this to be +1x you don't have to include the 1. All you have to do, just write down the x plus x is the same as plus 1x. So right now, we are going to replace negative 9x by these two values. So now when we do that, automatically the equation becomes 5x squared plus x negative 10x negative 2 equal 0. So now we are going to, the next step is to factor them in 2s. So we're going to take these first two values and find their GCF. So the GCF of 5x squared and x will be x. So let's write it here. So 5x squared divided by x, that's going to give us 5x. And x divided by x is going to give us 1. So next is to find the GCF of negative 10 and negative 2, because we have to factor these two numbers again. So the GCF of negative 10x and negative 2 will be negative 2. So now let's divide negative 10x by negative 2. That is going to give us 5x. And negative 2 divided by negative 2, that is going to give us positive 1 equal 0. So you can see that we have a common value. You can see we have 5x plus 1, 5x plus 1. So now that it's common to both of them, we can just write it out as 5x plus 1. And then by the time we cancel this from here and also cancel it from here, what we have left is just x negative 2. So we can equate this to 0. So now, next step is to set both values or both factor to 0. So when we do that, we're going to have 5x plus 1 is equals to 0. And also 5 negative 2 is equal 0. So we are going to isolate 5x by subtracting 1 from both sides. Subtract 1 from both sides, and plus 1 minus 1 we cancel out, and now we are left with just 5x on the left side, and that will be equals to 0 minus 1. That's going to give us negative 1. So now we are going to divide both sides by 5. Divide both sides by 5 in order to find the value of x. So 5 is going to cancel out 5. That's going to give you 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So now x is equal negative 1, 5. So we are going to do the same thing to the second x. So now we are going to add 2 to both sides of this. Add 2 to both sides in order to isolate this value. So plus negative 2 plus 2 we cancel out. That will give you 0. And x will be left on the left side, and that will be equal to 0 plus 2, and that is 2. Now we have x is equals to negative 1 over 5 in the first part, and in the second part we have x is equals to 2. Therefore, the final answer is equals to negative 1 over 5 and 2. So this is the final answer, and I hope it makes some sense. So yeah, let's take another example. If we have 3d squared plus 3d squared plus 7d negative 6 equal 0. Now in this question you can see that the coefficient of d squared is greater than 1 3. The coefficient of d squared is 3, and that is greater than 1. So the first thing to do is to multiply this by negative 6, and that is going to give us negative 18 d squared. So now the next task is to negative 18 d squared. So the next task is to find the factors of negative 18 such that when we add them together, we should have plus 7. So the two factors of 18 that can give us that value should be 1 and 9. So we have negative 18. Therefore, we are going to assign negative to one of these two values. So if we assign negative to 2 and positive to 9, so negative 2 times plus 9 is going to give us negative 18. And their sum is going to give us positive 7. So once we have confirmed this, we can now add d to both of them. So in the first place, we have negative 2d, and in the second part, we have plus 9d. So next is to take these two values and substitute them in this position. So we are going to eliminate plus 7d and fix both negative 2d and plus 9d in that position. So the equation automatically becomes 3d squared plus 9d negative 2d negative 6 equal 0. You can see that I put in plus 9d before negative 2d. It doesn't actually matter. All right. It's possible to bring in the negative 2d before the plus 9d. So anyone can come first. It doesn't matter. So now at this point, we are going to factor them in twos. I'm going to factor the first two numbers, which is 3d squared and 9d. So the GCF of 3d squared and 9d is 3d. So now you can write it here, 3d, and open a parenthesis. So 3d squared divided by 3d, that's going to give us just d. And 9d divided by 3d is going to give us just 3. Alright, so we have factored this. And then now we can also factor the remaining two, which is 2d and then negative 2d and negative 6. So the GCF of negative 2d and negative 6 is negative 2. So now negative 2d divided by negative 2, that is going to give us just positive d. And negative 6 divided by negative 2 is going to give us positive 3. And this will be equals to 0. So you can see that in the parentheses, we have common value d plus 3, d plus 3. So we can write it out as d plus 3 in parentheses. And by the time we try to cancel this from here and this from here, you see that we are left with just 3d negative 2 equal 0. So at this point, we can set both numbers, set both of them to 0. So d plus 3 is equals to 0 and 3d negative 2 is equal 0. So now we are going to isolate d by subtracting 3 from both sides. Subtract 3 from both sides. And when you do that, plus 3 will cancel out negative 3. And we are left with d on the left. And this will be equals to 0 minus 3. And that is going to give us negative 3. So in the same way, we are going to add 2 to both sides of the second part of this question. And just to isolate 3d. So if we add 2 to both sides, plus 2 and plus 2, plus 2 and also add 2 to this side of the equation. So when that happens, negative 2, we cancel out positive 2 because negative 2 plus 2 is 0. So now we are left with 3d on the left side, and that will be equals to 0 plus 2, and that will give us 2. So now we can divide both sides by 3. Divide both sides by 3, and 3 is going to cancel out. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So we are left with d on the left side, and this will be equals to 2 over 3. Therefore, the final answer is equal, d is equal negative 3 and 2 over 3. Final answer. I hope it makes some sense. So now let's take the final question. So in this question we have d squared, 12d squared minus 11d plus 2. So you can see that the coefficient of d squared is 12. That is greater than 1. So the first thing is to multiply the whole of this by this. Multiply the whole of this by positive 2. So now 12d squared times 2, that's going to give us 24. So we have 24d squared. So now we're going to find two factors of 24 such that when we add them together, we should have negative 11. Negative 11. So what are the factors? 3 times 8 is 24. And the sum of 3 and 8 can give you 11. So now we have to think of the sign that can be added to these two numbers such that we can have their product to be positive 24 and their sum to be negative 11. So if we place a negative sign here and we multiply both of them, that's going to give us negative 24. What we need is positive 24. So let's also place a negative sign on this side, and negative 3 times negative 8, that's going to give us positive 24. And the sum of negative 3 and negative 8 is negative 11. So these two factors of 24 are valid. Now you can add x to them. So you have negative 3d and negative 8d. So what I'm going to do next is to replace negative 11d by both numbers. So we are going to write the equation again, and it will take this form. So 12d squared negative 3d negative 8d plus 2 equal 0. We have just replaced negative 11d by these two numbers, negative 3d and negative 8d. So you can see negative 3d and negative 8d has replaced negative 11d. You see how the 12d squared as the first number and plus 2 as the last number. So all we just did now is that we substitute negative 3d and negative 8d in the place of negative 11d. So now we can factor this equation in twos. The first two numbers, we can factor them, which are 12d squared and negative 3d. So what is the GCF of 12d squared and negative 3d? That will be 3d. The GCF of 12d squared and 3d is 3d. So now let's divide 12d squared by 3d. That is going to give us 4d. 12d squared divided by 3d will give us 4d. And 3d divided by 3d will give us negative 1. Negative 3d divided by 3d will give us negative 1. Also, we are going to find the GCF of these remaining two numbers, negative 8d and plus 2. So the GCF of negative 8d and positive 2 will be negative 2. Negative 2. So now, negative 8d divided by negative 2. That is going to give us positive 4d. And plus 2 divided by negative 2 will give us negative 1 equal 0. So now you can see we have 4d minus 1 in both parentheses. It's common to both parentheses, in both parentheses. So now we can write it out, 4d negative 1. And by the time we cancel that from here, we are now left with 3d negative 2 equal 0. So at this point, we can set both numbers to 0. So 4d negative 1 is equal 0. 3d negative 2 is equal 0. So now we can isolate 4d by adding 1 to both sides. Add 1 to both sides. So when you add 1 to both sides, negative 1 plus 1 will cancel out. And now you are left with just 4d on the left side, and 0 plus 1 is 1. So now we can divide both sides by 4. Divide both sides by 4. And 4 is going to cancel out 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So now we have d is equal 1/4. And also, we are going to isolate 3d by adding 2 to both sides of this second part of the question. So add 2 to both sides. So when you do that, negative 2 plus 2 we cancel out, and we are left with 3d is equal to 0 plus 2. That's going to give us 2. So now we can divide both sides by 3. Divide both sides by 3. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. So this will give you 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So now we are left with just d is equal 2 over 3. Therefore, d is equal to 1/4 and 2/3. Final answer. Hope this is clear to you. So if you find this video useful, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like the video, send your comments, and also share with your friends. Thank you very much. I'll be looking forward to seeing you in our next video. Bye-bye.